I am Bryce of the Cinder Archive, and this is Chapter 14, What's Left of Mark IV. Geary asked them, as close to begging as any of them had heard from him, not to come here. He did not forbid it. Bram was right about that, in the lane outside of Claire's cottage, watching a small brass proxy run out of anything to offer but fear, and a request refused is not the same as a rule broken. Still, 5 people do not walk toward a place a frightened man has all but pleaded with them to leave alone without feeling the weight of that refusal somewhere in their chest. They feel it now, standing at the edge of Aldergate, looking at a building that has clearly been trying for years to fall down quietly enough that no one would come looking at what killed it. Whatever they find inside, it will not be the last word on any of this. If anything, walking here at all seems likely to raise more questions than it answers. The shape of every discovery this book has handed them so far, each one a door opening onto 3 more doors rather than a room with an ending in it. The walk out from the city proper had taken the better part of an afternoon, following Mara's rough sketch past the old Cistern Road's last working pump station, and onward into a stretch of Aldergate that the city's ordinary business seems to have quietly written off decades ago. Warehouses gone to rust, a scatter of workers' cottages long since abandoned to weather and time, the whole district carrying the specific, unhurried decline of a place nobody had any particular reason to tear down, and even less reason to maintain. None of them had said much on the way. Whatever conversation there was to have about defying Geary's wishes, they'd mostly had it already, back in the lane outside Marrow's cottage. What remained now was simply the walking and the steadily growing awareness, shared without needing to be spoken, that whatever waited at the end of this particular road was not going to be small. The annex sits at the end of a lane the old Cistern Road forgot, half swallowed by growth that has had a long time to work without anyone stopping it. Ivy thick enough to have pried gaps between brass wall fixtures and the stone behind them, a roofline sagging in 2 places where old timber finally gave up holding its own weight. What remains of the walls still shows the shape of a proper Gearwright building underneath the ruin. Tall windows, now mostly broken. A chimney stack, cold for what must be the better part of a decade. Brass piping running along the exterior in the same purposeful lines every hall building shares, gone green now with verdigris where it hasn't simply been swallowed by vine. The lane itself has gone to seed as thoroughly as the building at its end. Cart ruts, long since grown over, a low wall on one side collapse into a line of loose stone that nothing has bothered to clear away, the whole approach carrying the specific, unhurried neglect of a place the city itself seems to have quietly agreed to stop remembering. The light is already turning, the afternoon's flat gray deepening by degrees toward evening, and something about the quality of it. Thin, colorless, filtering down through a sky that can't decide whether to rain, makes the annex ahead of them look less like a ruin and more like a held breath. This is the place, Wick says. Unnecessary? Checking Marrow's rough sketch one final time against the lane's actual geography before folding it away. Nobody argues the point. The building doesn't need confirming. It announces itself, in the particular language of abandoned places, as somewhere something ended badly enough that no one ever came back to finish tidying up after it. Senna stands a moment at the threshold of what was once a proper doorway, one hand resting, briefly, against the frame's cold stone. "We're doing this against his wishes," she says, quiet, not quite a question. More a fact she needs to say aloud before they cross it. "I want that said plainly once, before we go in. Whatever we find here, we chose this. He asked us not to, and we're doing it anyway. And I'd rather carry that honestly than pretend it doesn't weigh anything." "It weighs something," Brum agrees. "It doesn't weigh enough to stop us. Those aren't the same thing, and I think we already decided which one mattered more back in that lane. I know we did." Senna's hand falls away from the stone. "I only wanted it said. Nobody disagrees with her wanting it said." Orsa, at the group's edge, has already gone quiet in a way that has nothing to do with the conversation, her eyes moving across the dead, overgrown lot with the flat, wary attention of someone reading ground she doesn't like the feel of, though she offers no words for it yet. Tamsin stands closest to the doorway of anyone but Senna, and has been quiet since the lane, her attention fixed on the building with an intensity that isn't quite dread and isn't quite recognition either, some third thing none of them, including her, has language for yet. Her hand, Senna notices without remarking on it, has curled slightly at her side, the same old unconscious habit from the archive, from Marrow's cottage, from every moment these last several chapters that some part of her has reached toward this exact mystery without quite meaning to. They go in together, Bram leading without anyone formally deciding he should, boots crunching over debris that was once, by the look of the scattered brass fittings underfoot, someone's careful inventory of parts. The doorway's threshold is worn smooth in a way that speaks to years of foot traffic before whatever happened here happened. Dozens of people, once, coming and going through this exact space, none of them imagining it would end up like this. The transition from lane to interior carries its own small unsettling shift, the ordinary outdoor chill giving way to something colder, staler, the specific temperature of a space that has not felt sun or moving air properly in a very long time. Their footsteps echo differently here too, off walls that still hold some ghost of their original acoustics even through the ruin, so that each step sounds for a moment like two steps, one real and one following just slightly behind it. Inside, the wreckage resolves into something more specific than simple decay. The annex's main floor was, once, a proper workshop, benches still standing in rough rows, though most have collapsed under years of settling roof debris, and the brass fixtures along the walls, half swallowed by rust and creeping green growth outside, show here, indoors and out of the weather's worst reach, a different and more troubling kind of damage. The air itself carries a smell, none of them quite expected, not simply the mildewed dampness of long abandonment, but something underneath it, old smoke gone stale and cold, ash that has had years to settle into every crack and crevice and never once been swept away. Dust motes hang in the thin gray light filtering through the broken roof, disturbed by their footsteps into slow drifting spirals that make the whole ruined floor feel, for a moment, suspended out of time entirely. Long black scorch marks streak up one entire wall, fanning outward from a point near the floor in the unmistakable pattern of something that burned hot and fast rather than slow. A second wall bears deep gouges at roughly chest height, 4 parallel lines dragged hard enough to splinter the stone beneath the old plaster, the marks themselves gone pale and weathered now but no less violent for the years since they were made. That's not fire damage alone, Bram says, crouching near the base of the scorched wall, one broad hand hovering a careful inch above the blackened stone without touching it. Fire scorches outward evenly, from whatever caught first. This pattern's got direction to it. Something moved while it was burning, or burning while it moved. See how it narrows here, widens there? That's a body in motion, not a stationary blaze. He shifts his attention to the gouged wall without standing, tracing the same careful inch of distance along its length. And these, he nods toward it, those aren't tool marks. Something with real weight behind it dragged claws or blades through stone that thick, fast enough and hard enough to splinter rather than simply scratch. That's not an accident, that's a fight. A fight with what? Senna asks, careful, though something in her voice suggests she already suspects the shape of the answer waiting further in. Wick crouches near a scattering of debris, a few paces further on. Shattered glass, the twisted remains of what might once have been a delicate pressure gauge, all of it half buried under years of settled dust. Whatever it was, it happened fast, he says, turning a fragment of glass over in his fingers before setting it back down exactly where he found it, an old habit of a man who has learned, over many searches, to disturb a scene as little as the search itself requires. Nobody had time to clean up or salvage anything of value before they left. Look at this. Good glasswork, expensive, just abandoned where it shattered. You don't leave equipment like that behind, unless leaving fast mattered more than what you were leaving. He moves further along the bench line, boots careful over debris that shifts unevenly underfoot, and stops at a second cluster of ruin, a toolkit, its case long rotted away, individual tools scattered as though the whole thing had been kicked or thrown rather than simply dropped. This wasn't tidied up after either, he adds. Whoever left last, they didn't come back for a second pass. Not once in, 8 years now? 9? That's not how you treat a workshop you intend to use again. That's how you treat a place you want to forget exists. Senna crouches near the scattered tools herself, turning one over in her hands, a fine calibration wrench, rusted through, the kind of instrument that would have cost a season's wages new. Whoever built this cared enough to buy the best tools available, she says, quiet. And whoever left them to rot rather than come back for even the valuable ones. That's not carelessness. That's someone who couldn't make themselves return. They find it a few steps past the second bench, a suit frame, collapsed against the base of a fallen support beam as though it had been thrown there and simply never moved again. It's smaller than any of them expected. Somehow, not the towering, impossible silhouette the rumors of grown thruster housings and stolen field-tested gear might have primed them to imagine, but a frame roughly a man's height and breadth, articulated at shoulder and elbow and knee in a language that looks, even ruined, unmistakably like an earlier, cruder ancestor of every stolen suit they've faced since Chapter 4. A stamp plate at the frame's collar, blackened but legible if you look closely enough. Reads *Mark IV. Bram kneels beside it for a long moment, saying nothing at first, and there's real reverence in how he handles what comes next, brushing debris carefully away from the frame's chest plate, rather than simply clearing it, the specific, unhurried respect of a craftsman examining another craftsman's ruined work. His fingers move along the frame's joints one at a time, cataloging damage with the same careful, professional attention he gave the captain's stolen thruster housing back in Chapter 5's wreckage, though the quiet on his face now carries something closer to mourning than tactical assessment. Beautiful design, he says finally, quiet, even like this. Look at the joint articulation. Nobody builds a knee hinge this clean without understanding exactly how weight moves through a body in motion. Whoever built this wasn't just solving a problem, they loved doing it. His fingers trace, without quite touching, a long dent across the frame's shoulder plate, deep enough to have buckled the metal beneath the surface dents. And whatever did this to it hit hard enough to fold brass this thick like paper? That's not a workshop accident. That's a real fight, between two things strong enough to leave marks like this on each other. He shifts his weight, examining the frame's ruined leg assembly with the same unhurried care, and something in his expression shifts toward a kind of professional sorrow that goes beyond simple appreciation. I've handled a fair amount of ruined gear in my time, battlefield salvage mostly before the Ironbreaker Hall. You learn to read a wreck the way you'd read a wound. This wasn't overwhelmed. Whatever hit it hard, but the frame put up a real fight before it went down. See here, this brace still holding its shape even where everything around it's crushed. Somebody built this to survive far worse than most gear its size ever has to. It just wasn't enough in the end, against whatever it was actually up against. Two things, Orsa repeats, low, from somewhere near the wall's gouged claw marks. Not one thing attacking a person. Two things fighting. Nobody answers her directly. The distinction sits in the room's cold, ash-smelling air, unaddressed, the way a lot of things in this building seem content to sit unaddressed. It's Tamsin who reaches the frame last and the one who stays closest to it once she arrives. She said little since the doorway, quieter even than her usual careful quiet, and when she finally steps close enough to kneel beside Bram at the ruined suit's side, something in her posture makes Senna look up sharply, some instinct older than the mission recognizing, before her mind has quite caught up, that this is not the same careful curiosity Tamsin has shown toward every stolen suit and thruster housing since Chapter 4. There's no hesitation in her this time. None of the careful half-distance she's kept from every piece of Gearwright metal since the archive drums first made her go quiet. She moves toward the ruined frame the way a person moves towards something they've been separated from far too long, drawn rather than curious, and Senna's hand twitches once at her side, some instinct urging her to intervene before she's even sure what she'd be intervening in. Tamsin reaches out. Not with the careful, half-distance touch she's given every piece of Gearwright metal since the archive drums, but fully, both hands, pressing flat against the frame's cold chest plate before anyone can think to stop her or ask if she should. Her breath catches immediately, a short, ragged pull of air that sounds wrong in the quiet room, and her eyes lose their focus all at once, pupils blown wide, fixed on something none of the rest of them can see. Her whole body goes rigid, spine straightening as though some current has passed through her, and for one suspended moment, the ruined workshop floor around them seems to hold its breath along with her. Tamsin. Senna is at her side in an instant, one hand coming to rest against her shoulder, careful, steadying, though Tamsin doesn't seem to register the touch at all. Tamsin, look at me. What are you feeling? Tamsin doesn't answer, not at first. Her whole body is gone rigid, hands still pressed flat to the ruined metal, breath coming fast and shallow, and something moves behind her closed. No, not closed, wide open and unseeing, eyes that none of them have words for. A flicker of something that isn't quite memory and isn't quite sensation, borrowed from a source none of them can name. Her lips part once, as though she's about to speak, and instead only a thin, involuntary sound escapes her, somewhere between a gasp and a word that never quite finishes forming. She manages, finely, voice thin, cracked at the edges. It's not cold. It's not like the drums or the archive. It's her hands tighten against the metal, knuckles white, fingernails leaving small pale crescents against her own skin where they press too hard. It's warm. It shouldn't be warm. It's been dead this long. But it's warm like something that was recently someone. And I can feel she stops, chest heaving, and for one terrible moment looks like she might simply stop breathing entirely rather than finish the sentence. Her eyes, still fixed on nothing the rest of them can see, fill suddenly, without warning, with tears she doesn't seem aware she's crying. "Tamsin, you need to let go," Senna says, firmer now, real fear breaking through the careful calm of her voice. Her grip on Tamsin's shoulder tightens, and she glances once urgently at Bram, who has already begun to rise from his crouch beside the frame, ready to physically intervene if the next several seconds ask it of him. Whatever it is, let go of it. You don't have to finish feeling it to have felt it. Let go. It takes a long moment, long enough that Bram has started to reach for her other shoulder, long enough that Orsa has turned fully from the gouged wall to watch, sharp and ready to act, her whole body coiled with a particular readiness as someone prepared to physically pull a person free of danger, if words alone don't work, before Tamsin's hands finally peel away from the frame, fingers uncurling one at a time as though relearning, in real time, how to let go of something. She folds backward into Senna's steadying grip, shaking, drawing air in great uneven pulls like someone surfacing from water, held too long, and for several seconds simply breathes, eyes finally focusing again on the ruined room around her, rather than whatever place her mind had briefly gone instead. "I'm sorry," Tamsin gets out eventually, voice raw, wiping at her own damp cheeks with the back of one trembling hand, as though only now noticing she'd been crying. "I'm sorry, I don't know why I did that. I didn't decide to. My hands just went." "Don't apologize," Senna says, gentle, still holding her steady, one arm now fully around her shoulders. "What did you feel? Can you say it, even roughly?" Tamsin is quiet for a long moment, staring at the ruined frame from a careful near distance, arms wrapped around herself, still visibly trembling. "I don't have the right words for it," she says, finally. "It wasn't like touching metal. It wasn't even like touching a person exactly. It was like..." She stops, swallows, tries again. "Like touching something that used to be able to recognize me. That doesn't make sense. I know it doesn't make sense. I don't know how else to say it." Nobody presses her further. Bram, quiet, moves his own body slightly between Tamsin and the ruined frame, not blocking her view exactly, just offering, wordlessly, a small buffer of space, and Orsa watches the whole exchange with an expression that is gone, for just a moment, entirely unreadable, something between concern and a kind of grim, private recognition of her own, quickly folded away before anyone can ask her about it. Orsa has not said much since they entered the annex, and what little unease she's voiced has stayed at the edges. A comment about the claw marks, nothing more. It's what she hasn't said that draws attention, eventually, once Tamsin's breathing is steadied, and the party's focus scatters back outward across the ruined workshop floor. She stands near a section of wall where the building's growth has pushed furthest inside, vines thick as a wrist, working their way through a gap in the brickwork. Their leaves an odd, sickly shade of dark green that looks wrong even in the thin, failing light. Her expression, watching them, is not curiosity. It's the flat, wary stillness of an animal that has scented something wrong and hasn't yet decided whether the wrongness is a threat worth naming aloud. She crouches, briefly, to examine the soil where the vine roots dig into a crack between flagstones, rubbing a pinch of it between two fingers with the same practiced assessment she'd give any unfamiliar ground on the road. and whatever she finds in the texture of it makes her expression go, if anything, more careful rather than less. These shouldn't be growing like this, she says finally, to no one in particular, running 2 fingers along a vine's length without quite touching the leaves themselves. Ivy doesn't grow this thick, this fast, unless something's feeding it. Old blood, old ash, something rich enough in the soil to push growth well past what a building this size should support. I've seen battlefields recover slower than this room has grown over. She goes still, head tilted, and after a moment the rest of them notice what she's noticing. Outside the annex's broken windows, beyond the dead lot and the overgrown lane, there is no birdsong at all. Not the ordinary quiet of an empty building. An active, textured silence, the kind that exists specifically because something has decided this ground isn't safe to nest near. Even the wind, when it moves through the broken windows, seems to carry less sound than wind ought to carry, muffled somehow, as though the building itself has learned to swallow noise rather than let it travel. You think something's still here, Wick says, careful. I don't think that. Orsa's hand falls away from the vine, and she straightens, brushing the soil from her fingers with a small, unconscious grimace, as though the texture of it lingered somewhere past her skin. I think something happened here badly enough, that even the birds still remember it, generations on, without needing to know why. That's not the same as a threat lurking in the walls. It's worse, in its own way. A threat you can fight? This is just a place that's still hurting, long after whoever did the hurting left. She doesn't elaborate further, doesn't dress the observation in anything more articulate than that, and after a moment simply turns from the vine-choked wall and moves deeper into the annex, steering the party onward with nothing more than the certainty of her own steps, the specific, wordless authority of someone who has decided, without needing to explain it, which direction is safer to walk in. The rest of the party falls in behind her without argument. Nobody asks her to say more. Something in the flat, careful set of her shoulders makes clear that more isn't coming, and that pressing for it would cost more than it would earn. They find the logbook in a half-collapsed side room that must once have served as an office. A desk, warped and swollen with old water damage, wedged beneath a fallen ceiling beam that has crushed one corner of it flat. Loose papers, long since fused into an illegible pulp by years of damp, cover most of the floor around it, and a single chair lies overturned nearby, one leg snapped clean off, undisturbed since whatever day it fell. A cabinet beside the desk has fared slightly better, its door hanging open on a single surviving hinge, and it's there, in the cabinet's lowest drawer, protected just enough by the drawer's warped wood to have survived years of damp and rot, that Wick finds the book. It's in poor condition, water-stained through most of its pages, mildew blooming dark along the spine, whole sections fused together where moisture has done its slow work over what must be nearly a decade. Wick handles it the way he handled the patent record back in the archive, with the same slow, deliberate care of a man who understands that fragile evidence rewards patience far more than eagerness. He peels the pages apart one at a time, working from the more intact rear of the book forward, murmuring an apology under his breath each time a corner crumbles despite his care. Most of the surviving entries are technical, measurements, material notes, the dry, specific shorthand of an artificer tracking a long project's daily progress, page after page of it in a hand growing steadily more familiar the longer they look at it. Coupling housing, third revision, tolerance still too loose by half a degree. Second hand suggests reversing the low path. We'll test tomorrow. Long night. Good progress. Ordinary things, the small daily record of 2 people, or perhaps only one person and something else entirely, working steadily toward an ambition neither of them yet had a name large enough for. But one section, near what would have been the log's final surviving pages, reads differently, and it's Senna, carefully turning the last salvageable leaf, who finds it. Listen to this, she says, quiet, and reads aloud, slow, careful with the fragile paper. Second hand made an adjustment to the coupling housing today that I hadn't specified. Better than my own design, if I'm honest. Cleaner tolerance, less wasted motion. I asked where the idea came from. Second hand said I wanted to see if it could be better. I think it wanted that too. I don't know what to make of a collaborator who talks about the work wanting things. I find I don't mind it. The room goes quiet. Second hand, Wick repeats, turning the phrase over. That's a name. Has to be a nickname, maybe, but a name for a person. An assistant, an apprentice, someone close enough to the work that Geary trusted them making changes without asking first. It reads like a person, Senna agrees, carefully. Every entry does. Whoever second hand was, Geary writes about them the way you'd write about someone you respected. Not a tool. Not an assistant taking orders. A collaborator. She turns the fragile page over, searching for anything further, but the damage claims the rest. Ink bled entirely into the legible bloom. The final pages fused too thoroughly to risk separating without destroying whatever words might remain beneath. Bram, still kneeling near the ruined Mark IV frame in the next room, looks back through the doorway at the mention, something working behind his eyes. Second hand, he says? Slow. That's an odd thing to call a person if it's a nickname. Sounds more like a title. Like something you'd call a role, not a name. A mother gave someone. Plenty of nicknames sound like titles, Wick says. Doesn't mean it isn't one. Maybe not. Bram doesn't sound entirely convinced, but doesn't push the point further either, returning his attention to the ruined frame with the same careful, unhurried respect he's given it since they found it. Nobody has a better answer than that, and the ambiguity sits in the ruined little office alongside the mildew smell and the fading light, unresolved, exactly the way the clerk's quieter for a time sat unresolved a chapter ago. Another piece of a shape none of them can quite see the whole of yet. This matches what Marrow told us, Senna says finally, closing the fragile logbook with careful hands. A partner. Someone close enough to the project that Geary's own writing treats them as an equal. Whoever second hand was, they were here, working alongside him, right up until... She gestures, wordless, at the scorched wall visible through the doorway, at the ruined frame Bram still kneels beside. Right up until whatever happened here happened. Wick, still crouched by the ruined cabinet, pulls the drawer fully open to check for anything the logbook might have left behind, and his fingers find, tucked into the drawer's furthest corner, a small, ordinary thing that seems, somehow, to land harder than anything else the room has given up tonight. 2 mismatched mugs, cheap workshop crockery, one chipped along its rim, both long gone brittle and gray with age, but clearly, unmistakably, a matched pair kept together on He sets them on the warped desk without a word, and the party looks at them for a moment longer than their plainness seems to warrant. 2 cups, Orsa says, quiet from the doorway. Not one workman drinking alone. 2 people, sharing a workspace long enough to keep a second mug on hand for whoever else was working late with him. Or 1 person, and something that drank because it was learning to want the things a person wants, Wick says, and immediately looks like he wishes he hadn't said it aloud, the thought clearly having occurred to more than one of them already without anyone willing to give it voice first. Nobody argues the point, and nobody agrees with it either. The 2 ruined mugs sit on the desk in the fading light, mundane and inexplicably heavy, and after a moment, Senna reaches out and sets them gently back inside the drawer, as though returning them to whatever rest they'd been keeping before 5 strangers came through and disturbed it. We should go, she says. We have what we came for. Whatever's left to learn here, I don't think this room's going to give it up tonight, and I'd rather get Tamsin somewhere warm before the light goes entirely. Bram rises from beside the ruined Mark IV frame one last time, brushing debris from his knees, and pauses a moment longer at its side before turning to follow the others. We'll come back to this, he says, to no one in particular, or perhaps to the ruined suit itself. Whatever it turns out to mean. I don't like leaving good work in a state like this, even work that clearly cost somebody more than they could afford to lose. They leave the annex as the light outside has started properly failing, evening coming on fast and gray, the building's broken silhouette receding behind them as the party makes its way back down the forgotten lane toward the old cistern road and, beyond it, the ordinary lit windows of a city that has no idea what still stands, quietly ruined, at its own outer edge. Nobody looks back at it more than once. There's an unspoken agreement, somewhere in the tired set of 5 sets of shoulders, that the annex has given up everything it's going to give up tonight, and that lingering would only mean carrying its particular cold a little further than any of them want to. Nobody speaks for a long while. The logbook rides carefully wrapped in Wick's pack, the ruined memory of Mark IV left behind them in the dark where it's rested for years, and Tamsin walks near the back of the group, arms still wrapped loosely around herself, quieter even than she was on the way in. The lane's overgrowth catches at their boots in the near dark, and somewhere off in the trees an owl finally breaks the unnatural quiet that's held since they arrived, a small, ordinary sound that shouldn't feel as reassuring as it does. Proof that whatever wrongness Orsa named back at the annex hasn't followed them past its own boundary. It's Senna who finally breaks the silence, glancing back at Tamsin with the same careful concern she hasn't fully set down since the workshop floor. "You don't have to talk about it if you're not ready," she says, gentle. "But if there's anything more you can tell us, anything that would help us understand what you felt back there, I'd rather you say it than carry it alone." Tamsin is quiet for a long moment, watching the annex's broken roofline disappear behind a stand of trees as the lane bends, her steps slowing very slightly, as though some part of her is reluctant to let the distance between herself and the ruined frame grow any further than it already has. When she finally speaks, her voice is thin, uncertain, the voice of someone saying a true thing she doesn't yet understand the shape of. "It doesn't feel like metal recognizing metal," she says. "That's what I keep trying to explain and can't quite. It's not resonance the way I felt it with the other stolen suits. That's always been like hearing an echo of something. Familiar, but distant. The way any two pieces of well-made Gearwright work might feel familiar to each other. Craft recognizing craft, maybe. This was different." Her arms tighten around herself, a small, unconscious flinch, as though the memory of the sensation is enough on its own to raise goose flesh along her skin. This felt, she stops, swallows, forces the rest of the sentence out like it cost her something physical to say. It felt like family recognizing family. Nobody answers her right away. The lane's evening quiet holds around them, wind moving faintly through branches gone dark overhead, and not one of them, Tamsin least of all, has the first idea what she actually means by it, or why the words, once said aloud, feel heavier than anything else the annex gave up tonight. Wick's hand tightens, briefly, on the strap of his pack, where the logbook rides carefully wrapped. Senna's arm stays around Tamsin's shoulders a moment longer than the walk strictly requires. Even Orsa, several paces ahead, slows her stride just slightly, as though the words have reached her too, in whatever private language she reads discomfort in. They walk on into the gathering dark, the ruined workshop and its ruined suit and its ambiguous, unfinished logbook falling further behind them with every step, and none of it, not one piece of what they found tonight, has answered nearly as much as it's raised.